Good morning, everyone. I know we'll be joined by council members as their significant meeting is just ending, so we're going to be doing some transition. But in the interest of time, as we publish this meeting, and we've invited so many staff to be dedicated to this, we're going to be able to begin. This is the Public Works Department budget hearing that we're having as part of the annual budget committee. I'm John Quincy, the chair of the committee, joined at the moment by Councilmember Andrew Johnson, and will be, as I said, joined by others as we proceed. No quorum is needed, so this is an informational budget presentation, but it will give us an opportunity to ask questions and for you to introduce the tremendous investment we're about to be making in the Public Works Department. So this is Mr. Kotke, please begin.
Mr. Chair. Yes, my name is Steve Kotke. I'm the Director of Public Works and the City Engineer. So today I'm going to be presenting the Mayor's recommended 2016 budget for Public Works. I think basically we are very supportive of this budget recommendation and really take no exceptions. So what I'll be doing, I will wrap this up before noon. I'll manage my time to make sure that we're wrapped up before noon. And we'll hit some just organizational charts and kind of overview funding of the entire department initially. And then we'll get into the general fund programs. And following that will be both the enterprise funds, internal service funds, and touching on what I call the capital operating fund programs. I'd like to start out by just introducing our staff. This is our organizational chart. In Public Works, we have 8 operating divisions, and we've divided the department into what we call business lines. We have our business administration, which includes fleet operations. We have our utility business line and our transportation business line. I know that both of you are very familiar with our staff, our executive team in Public Works, but for those watching, I'd like to introduce the people in our organization that lead these different divisions. So let me start out with Heidi Hamilton. Heidi is our Deputy Director of Public Works. And then Brett Jelly. Brett is the Director of Administration. And then someone that's not with us today is John Sharpbillig, who is our fleet director. His son is getting married today, so I thought that was a good enough excuse for him not to show up. And then Glenn Garretts, who is our director of water treatment and distribution. David Herberholtz, our director of solid waste and recycling. Lisa Cerny, our director of surface water and sewers. And then Don Elwood, our Director of Transportation Engineering and Design. Mike Kennedy, who is our Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair. And John Borges, who is our Director of Traffic and Parking Services. And then Jenny Hager, our new Director of Transportation Planning and Programming. There has been some questions in the past, in the recent past, about just FTEs and increase in FTEs in the various departments. So I wanted to insert this slide just to give a kind of a reflection of the number of staff or FTEs that we have in the department. So you can see from 2015, we're not increasing the staff at all with this recommended budget. We have had a slight increase in employees over the last couple of years. Most of that increase is associated with, about half of it is associated with the organics program that we're rolling out. We're going to be adding staff to handle that service. And then about the other half is more associated with capital work and some of the increases that with creating the new division of transportation planning and programming. Just interestingly, when we were putting this together, I did take a look back to kind of give you a sense. I think back in the early 2000s, our FTE count was probably closer to like 1,200 FTEs. So we have reduced the number of people over the last 10 years.
Mr. Kotke, you note in the footnote there that this is for the operating departments. are there others that are not included in the slide that have changed or anything?
Yeah, it's a really good question, especially in our capital area. And I'm looking over the people who actually are what I call more seasonal or in the capital area. Are they included in these FTE counts? Okay, so this does not account for our people, for example, doing street construction work.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is the mayor's recommended 2016 budget for our expense budget overall for all funds within Public Works. We operate out of 15 funds in Public Works, so it's a bit complicated, but you can see that the enterprise funds make up most of our expense budget. The other thing that I wanted to point out, that if you look in your budget book, I think it's on page F197, the total dollar amount's different. It's about $345.8 million. And the reason that I'm showing $335.1 million is in the mayor's recommended budget, there was $10 million placed in for the 10th Avenue Bridge. That got put into our capital operating budget. It actually should be put into the capital, the net debt bond portion. So my understanding is that's going to be transferred over. So this 335.1 is probably a better reflection of our actual expense budget for 2016. Just a couple other things, just maybe to explain the chart. So the enterprise funds, solid waste, recycling, surface water and sewers, parking, water, those are our enterprise funds. And then the special revenue funds is actually the DID in West Broadway, so those special service districts. Unlike our other special service districts, this actually flows through. So that $6.2 million is associated with the DID. It's a pass-through. Then, of course, our internal service funds are fleet, lab work, traffic stores. And then in the capital project portion, that's our operating capital project. So that's kind of the engineers, a lot of the people that work in Don Elwood's organization.
Thank you. Mr. Conkey, before you flip the slide, this gives us a little opportunity to introduce the additional council members who have been able to join us. Councilmember Cano, Councilmember Goodman, Council Vice President Glidden, Councilmember Palmisano, and the Chair of the Public Works or Transportation Public Works Committee, Councilmember Reich.
All right, thank you. So this is our the mayor's recommended 2016 budget for revenue in Public Works overall. If you were to do the comparison between our revenue budget and our expense budget, you'll notice that the revenue budget is higher. And the primary reason for that is in the enterprise area, the revenue is higher because this also covers both debt service and capital expenditures. And those types of expenditures are not reflected in our expense budget. So that's really the reason for the difference between those two. So let me jump into our general fund. These next two slides, both slide 8 and slide 9, are really kind of a high-level summary of our general fund budget and the programs and the associated enhancements, and also a comparison with 2015. So I'm going to walk through these fairly quickly, but in later slides I'll be going through each one of these in more detail, so there'll be further explanation. But these two slides are kind of a good reference if you need to kind of check back in on just general recommendations for budgets and all of our programs. So let me just walk through this real quickly and primarily just focus in on some of the enhancements, which we'll talk about a bit later. In our street lighting, where we do have a $400,000 enhancement request. That's a one-time request. The traffic, we'll call it non-general fund component is listed separately here, but in traffic we have about a $71,000 ongoing enhancement. In the Malls and Plaza program, that's probably one of our larger enhancement requests. It's $226,000, which we'll explain in a later slide. Surface transportation and management program, a $75,000 one-time enhancement, and then transportation planning and programming. We actually have two enhancement requests here. One is one-time for $360,000, and then the other is ongoing, which is $174,000.
Mr. Cockey, we have a question from Council President Johnson, who's joined us.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the Mr. Cockey, on the surface transportation management, it looks like in 2015 you had a $2.9 million budget out of the general fund there, but the recommendation is for $2 million, so almost $1 million cut there. So that $75,000 enhancement doesn't look so great. What's the reason for that discrepancy there?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I'm assuming the question is why the drop in.
Yeah.
Let me when we get to that area, I'll take a look at it. My assumption would be is we probably had a one-time enhancement last year, and so I guess we. What's that? Oh, okay. It was associated with the creation of the Transportation Planning and Programming Division, and we moved some people from that area into our new program.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi.
Okay, so that's reflected then on the next one there where you had a big bump there then. 2.4, 375 to 2.4.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay, so this is our overall general fund expenditure budget in Public Works. As has been in past years, our snow and ice control is the largest program element that we have in our general fund, and followed by street maintenance and then traffic.
Mr. Cockey, does this slide that you're showing right now, does that include the $10 million fund balance that's used for the 10th Avenue Bridge?
Mr. Chair, no, it doesn't. I believe that increase was showing up in our capital operating budget in the overall budget. So I think if you looked at our overall expenses, it's indicated there, but not in our general fund portion.
Ms. Christensen, is that?
Yes, I believe that's correct, Chair Quincy.
Okay.
I wanted to show this slide. What this is all the programs that we have in our general fund in Public Works. The blue or the lighter blue is our expenses in each one of those programs, and the I guess I'll refer to it as purple is our revenue source. But this is revenue sources other than property taxes and LGA. And the reason I think this is kind of important to see is that in the Public Works General Fund budget, in that $57 million budget, expense budget, we have revenues from other sources other than property taxes and LGA that make that up. So you can see that, for example, that I guess snow and street maintenance and so forth, we rely very much on what I call the general funds from property taxes. But when you get into areas like, for example, our ramps, our parking ramp maintenance, that's 100% backed by revenue from the parking fund. and some of these other revenue sources come from things like municipal state aid, license and permits, utility cut revenue that we get for the work we do on utility cut repairs. The other thing I just wanted to point out on this is, so over the years that when we have had to, make general fund budget cuts, those cuts are typically more in the areas where you see that are more reliant on property tax and LGA funding. So let me get into the specifics now. So the Malls and Plazas program, which is in the Transportation Maintenance and Repair Division, we're requesting a $1.8 million expenditure budget. And Malls and Plazas, a good portion of the work we do, we have about 199 acres. They're usually smaller parcels throughout the city that we are responsible for doing, mowing and picking up litter and collection and just general landscape maintenance. The other thing that we do out of this fund, though, is we've been taking care of our bike off-street bike trail system. And so the enhancement request that we have here is associated with our bike system. So one of the things that we've been able to do is make some great progress on our bike infrastructure in the city over the last year, and both with protected bikeways, and this is tied into our newly adopted protected bikeway master plan. And so a lot of those, what we call tier 1 projects, we're making headways on those. We completed about 4.3 miles of those this past year. And what the enhancement request is about, one, doing the appropriate level of maintenance on those systems, sweeping and cleaning and snow removal. Then the other thing that we were interested in doing is it's for bike lanes, having bike lanes properly maintained is probably even more important than having to maintain at a higher level than just our street system is important. Having sand and debris and so forth in bike lanes is more of a hazard for our bicycling community than our streets for automobiles. So what the proposal that we're putting forward is that we would like to move our level of service for sweeping on the both the bike lanes and shared lanes and boulevards, bike boulevards, to a once a week sweeping. And this is a goal that we're setting. We think it's achievable, and this enhancement would make up a portion of those expenses as well. As I mentioned earlier, our snow and ice control program, which is in transportation maintenance repair, is our largest program budgetarily in the general fund. 13.3 million is what we're requesting for 2016. We have a 2.6 revenue budget. Some of that is associated with MSA and revenue from other sources. Maybe just to go over the basics here. This budget's always a bit challenging to set. We keep track of historically what we've spent in snow and ice control. Over the years, as you know, the amount of snow we get over in the wintertime varies quite a bit. But this is based on kind of an average over 5 years on the amount of expenses. And it seems to work out fairly close. And if we have a year that we have little snow, obviously we'll run under, and if we have years that we have heavy snows, obviously we'll run over and rely on reserve funds for covering those expenses. The street maintenance and repair program is also in Transportation and Maintenance Repair Division. We have about a $10 million expenditure budget request. We have about a $5 million revenue budget, and that's due, as I mentioned before, both to MSA, but we have, when we do utility cut repairs, that is also a revenue source that we get reimbursed for. In this program, we do pothole patching and repair. We do the preventive maintenance work that's identified, and then, as I mentioned before, our utility cut restoration. In the last few years, a lot of utility work is being done, so that's keeping us very, very busy. The Bridge Maintenance and Repair Program in Transportation Maintenance Repair Division, we have a request for $3 million, and we focus in on about 193 city-owned bridges. We actually have more bridges than that in the city that we get involved in more on the inspection end of things, which I'll speak to later. But the purpose of the Bridge Maintenance Repair Program is to provide basic maintenance and repair services for these vehicle, pedestrian, and other bridges. They also provide support services for our bridge inspection and construction units that are actually in the Transportation Engineering and Design Division. Ramp Maintenance and Repair Program, which is in Transportation Maintenance and Repair. And as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of the Ramp Maintenance Repair Program is to provide maintenance repair to our 17 parking ramps that we have in the city. 13 of them are city-owned parking ramps. 3 are the state-owned. Those are our TAD ramps, ABC. And then we have 1 privately owned city-operated parking ramp as well. So the primary focus of this group is to do the maintenance and repairs for those structures. A lot of it is both cleaning, getting the salt and debris off the decks of the ramps, but that we also do concrete repair as well, and caulking and sealing. This group also works with property services. The people with the skill sets that we have in this particular program are also helpful for property services to do repairs on city buildings, so they assist in that as well. Special Service District program, which is managed out of Transportation Maintenance and Repair as well. And I want to distinguish this because this is the 14 special service districts that we have throughout the city. These are pass-through dollars, so you can see that the expenditure budget of about $1.6 million is the same as our revenue budget of $1.6 million. And so these are what we call city-managed special service districts. And I want to just make the distinction. Earlier I had mentioned that, for example, the DID and West Broadway, which are self-managed special service districts, we handle those different from financially. The street lighting program, now this is in the Traffic and Parking Services Division. This is, the program summary is basically to operate and maintain the existing streetlight system in the city of Minneapolis. I think you're all familiar with the streetlights that we have in Minneapolis. This is the program that certainly pays for the electricity of all those streetlights, but a good portion of those streetlights are actually owned by Excel. So you can see on the slide here, about 28,000 of them are Excel, and those are the wood poles. So that's probably kind of the easiest way to distinguish what is a Excel-owned streetlight. And then there's 20,000 city streetlight poles, and those are typically metal poles. This program pays for both the electrical cost, but also the maintenance and repair of these streetlights. So the enhancement request that we have here is the acceleration of the LED streetlight program. So we are in the process right now of converting the city-owned streetlights, a good portion of them, to LEDs. And I think our current program now is about $200,000 a year. This has a great payback. We have about a 3.5-year payback on this. And so the idea is, since we have such a short payback period on this, let's accelerate the program and try to get more streetlights converted over to LEDs faster. And so this is a request for $400,000 that would be added on to the dollars that we currently have in our budget.
Mr. Kaki, I wondered if you might be able to provide a little more detail on how much this might save us actually in operating costs going forward in terms of in dollar value.
Yeah, well, let me just maybe talk about this amount, the $400,000. The $400,000 will allow us to do, I think, about close to 900 additional streetlights next year, and the savings from that would be about $112,000 per year just for that amount.
Great, thank you.
So the traffic program in Traffic and Parking Services Division, we have a $9.8 million expenditure request, and we have about a $3.7 million revenue budget. This is the program that really operates and maintains the signals and traffic signals, the traffic signs, the pavement markings throughout the entire city. The additional request here of $71,000, this enhancement is tied very kind of similar to the enhancement I talked before regarding our bike system, and that we are making some great headway on expanding our bike system and putting in protected bikeways, and this will require just more street markings. And so the bulk of this request is just associated with pavement markings and delineators associated with our bike facilities. So the Surface Transportation Management Program, which is in our Transportation Engineering and Design Division, spoke about this a bit earlier, that we moved some people from this division over to our new division. But within the general fund portion of this division, and maybe I'll just speak about that a little bit. This is Don Elwood's group. So in Don Elwood's group, we have a portion that are paid for by general fund, but a good portion of his people are actually in what we call the 4100 fund or the capital fund. But this is the general fund portion of Mr. Elwood's budget. And it includes bridge inspection, right-of-way permitting, asset management, and so forth. I'm sorry, not asset management, but special assessment work. One of the enhancements that we're requesting here is $75,000. This is really directed specifically to our bridge inspections. We found that we needed some additional dollars to hire really consultants, professional engineers who specialize in bridges to really help us diagnose the specific issues that we have with bridges a little bit earlier on, to really understand, do we have a restoration issue? Do we have just a repair issue? Do we have a replacement issue? So these dollars here will be directed primarily to be hiring an outside structural engineer to assist us in some of that evaluations. The Transportation Planning and Programming program in our Transportation and Planning Division. This is the division that we created last year. And as I mentioned previously, they do a variety of work, long-range transportation planning and capital improvement. Our entire capital improvement plan, 5-year plan, is managed out of this division. Submittals to CLIC. Partnerships with public agencies. This is the group that works with, we have a lot of projects within the city that we need to be working on jointly with Hennepin County, MnDOT, Metro Transit. So this is the group that's primarily working on those projects, at least particularly early on, and doing a lot of community engagement work on transportation projects. One of the things that we're really focusing in on more, and we want to focus in on more on, is the issue of asset management and really better understanding the condition, particularly, of all of our infrastructure throughout the city, but this group is particularly focusing in on our street infrastructure. And so the enhancement request that we have here, it's a $360,000 one-time. But let me clarify this. This is really about hiring a contractor or consultant who specializes in doing pavement analysis, and they have a special vehicle that drives through and does condition assessment of the pavements, and we do this once every 4 years. So even though this says it's a $360,000 one-time, 4 years from now, either I or someone else will be probably coming forth and asking for the same request. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. This is a one-time, but it will be reoccurring about once every 4 years. This is a shift in how we do asset management for streets. Previously, we actually use summer people to go out and do evaluation of our street systems. We could do maybe 25 to maybe a 33%